In 1997, Hong Kong was handed back from the British government to the Chinese government, according to the Sino-British Joint Declaration signed in 1984, which is tabled in the United Nations and being recognized by a lot of Western democracies. So under this agreement, Hong Kong people are promised that they will enjoy autonomy and democracy after 1997, which Hong Kong is handed back to mainland China, and we are remaining an autonomous part of China, which our internal affairs are all on our hands and will not be intervened by the Chinese government. So Hong Kong people were having an expectation that Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong after 1997. But obviously, these promises are not being implemented by the Beijing authority, and our autonomy and democracy and freedom have been eroded for the past 2 decades. So for Hong Kong people, what we are fighting now, the autonomy and democracy, are actually very legitimate, because these are the things that Beijing government promised us in the 80s. Well, growing up in a blue-collar families, both my parents are from mainland China. One of them is a construction worker, and the other was street cleaner. So when I was very little, I moved to Hong Kong from mainland China with my mother when I was 6. And in my family education, we have not been talking about like things concerning politics, human rights, and social affairs, because they are more intended to pro-stability. So they wanted to be in Hong Kong and have economic benefit from the city and try to make a living from it. So throughout my childhood or my adolescence, I've not been really talking things with my family. And the schools that have been studying during my primary and secondary schools, those are pro-Beijing schools. So it's quite ironic that an individual like me actually was receiving education from it. But nonetheless, one incident really triggered my curiosity and started to explore concepts and issues like democracy and freedom. In 2010, when Liu Xiaobo got the Nobel Peace Prize, the principal of the secondary school publicly denounced him in front of the student crowd. So I was one of them, and I was very curious, because I thought that Nobel Prize is to honor those who are excellent in that field. So how come such a laureate would be criticized in that fashion? So it really triggered my curiosity, and I browsed on the internet and looked for information about what has he done, and things about human rights in mainland China and all the freedom stuff. So it is quite an enlightenment moment for me that I continue to explore more on the concept. So I think, yeah, indeed, throughout my, the period I've been growing up, this is quite an important incident that made me walk into politics. Well, since the negotiation on the hangover in the 80s, Hong Kong's democratic movement has been ongoing for more than 3 decades. And recently, there has been a wave of youth-led activism that took place in several important social events in Hong Kong. In 2012, a group of middle school students formed the Scholarism and to openly oppose the implementation of national education, which is allegedly accused of brainwashing the secondary and primary school students, saying that all communist parties are good and positive parties, and really undermining the concept of democracy. So it triggered a huge opposition in the society, and the protest of the national education received a great success, that the government stopped to introduce the national education as a subject compulsorily in the school. So after that, in 2014, when we were having a political reform proposal on the 2017 chief executive, which is our top officials election, that people were demanding open and free and genuine universal suffrage under the election. So there were massive protests asking for democracy. And by the time Beijing introduced a white paper saying that they are basically killed the possibility of implementing democracy in 2017. So people were infuriated, and they decided to take actions that we have never done before, actions that is a breakthrough in our democratic movement, which we took place on the street and committed into civil disobedience actions. We occupied the street for 79 days, and it is being called as the umbrella movement in the pursuit of democracy. At the end of the day, the government didn't make any concession, and the movement failed to achieve the goal of having a political reform that allows Hong Kong people to vote for a full legislature and its chief executive. But it has planted seeds for people to resist and to understand that sometimes we need to take more proactive actions in order to pressure the government and to show that the government is so ignorant towards the opinion and demands of the people. And we have to fight for our future and our shared values. So after it, in 2019, the extradition law protest came into place, and the government wanted to introduce an extradition law that allows Chinese government to extradite Hong Kong suspects back to mainland China, which they could obviously use it as a legal weapon to extradite political activists in Hong Kong back to mainland China and let them to suffer for years of imprisonment. So by then, Hong Kong people were also really infuriated and think that one of the very crucial nature of one country, two system, which between Hong Kong and China, we have two separate legal systems which could protect the rights of Hong Kong, is being demolished. So people were so angry, and then they marched down to the street. Well, protesting in Hong Kong has never been easy because the government has been trying to quash the freedom of assembly and political opinion from the people. So in 2014, during the umbrella movement, I, Joshua Wong, and Alex Chow, and other prominent student activists were arrested, and we were jailed because of that. And in subsequent years, every year we got many political activists because they had rallies or they had demonstrations and they got arrested. And for now, the latest news is that Jimmy Lai and Agnes Chow, they were just arrested a couple of weeks ago under the name of national security law, which could put them in jail for maximum lifelong sentencing. So the price and the imprisonment that the activists have to face increase along with the time. And like for me, I was sentenced to 8 months in 2017. But for now, the numbers of years that the activists have to face would be much longer than it. So the cost and of the activists has been arising, and it's really devastated that the Hong Kong, the judicial system is actually cooperating with the authority in order to halt the protests, which the protesters are actually asking for legitimate demands. For the ongoing anti-extradition protest, it is a leaderless protest, so that there has not been any single event that is being hosted by a huge organization that has that kind of overarching power to control where to protest or who is going to involve or what tactics should be involved. All these information are circulated online and deliberated online or on the ground with the protesters themselves. So everything becomes so fluid and sometimes volatile that makes a very powerful authoritarian regime hard to grasp where the people are and what they're going to do. This kind of be water tactics really diversifies the protest and make it hard to predict than hard to prevent. So in the very early stage of the protest, we have a massive rallies organized on a in a specific time and specific location. But when people show up in the location, so people deliberated on the ground what to do, and there are different groups of people doing different things. Some of them are having resources station that provide water or tower or any equipment that they need. And there are some more frontline protesters that they are in full gear and they are ready to have some kind of competitive contact with the police, and we've got some others who are responsible for the promotion materials that they distribute leaflets and making artifacts in concerning the protest contents. So this is a very massive protest, and people have their roles. But the most dangerous place is of course at the front line, when you are in the front line, ready to have confrontation to the police, or you have to like cover the more vulnerable peaceful crowds behind you. So I've been these situations several times, and we can see that the police is actually having a lot of power on their hands to attack and to harm those protesters without following the proper protocol. And a lot of time they are just instantly raided to the police crowd, or firing rubber bullets and tear gas without any warning, and making them to suffer from these serious police brutality. So when I was there, those are very intense moments, and I've seen a lot of these arbitrary and abusive use of force from the police, and of course, there are protesters suffer from it. I don't think any one of us is blindly optimistic about Hong Kong's future. We are facing probably the largest authoritarian regime in humankind's history, or at least for now is the second largest economy in the world. It's difficult to really to conquer and to overcome those difficulties imposed by such a giant state apparatus. But for us, it's important that we have to defend our values and not to be subsumed by this authoritarianism, and to show that we have a certain persistence and upholding certain values, that even though we are in an extremely difficult situation, we will not abandon them. So it's a matter of dignity, and it's a matter of who we are, is the essence of the Hong Kong community. Starting from several months ago, the police force had already been banning all the application for assemblies. And under the COVID situation, the government has limited public gathering into 2 to 4 people, so that they will harshly disperse all the crowds when they see them. So this is acting in the name of public health to expand their power in the state of emergency, and sustain it in the long-term future in order to achieve the goal of political suppression. The national security law in Hong Kong circumvented all the local legislation and consultation process, and single-handedly drafted and imposed by the Chinese authoritarian authority on Hong Kong people. It basically states very vaguely that if you somehow collude with foreign forces, incite hatred towards the central and towards the Hong Kong government, you could be locked up in prison for lifelong sentencing, or even extradited back to mainland China. So it offered a very strong legal weapon for the Beijing authority to prosecute all the political dissidents, because they have the right to interpret what does it mean by colluding with foreign forces? What does it mean by inciting hatred? Maybe one day you criticize Xi Jinping, that could mean that you are intriguing hatred and lock you in jail. So this kind of draconian law, it is not as what the Beijing authority or the Hong Kong official says, that it protects one country, 2 system. It is on the contrary. It is the last nail of the coffin of one country, 2 system, because it basically destroys all the freedom of expression of people. And there have been people being arrested just because of Facebook posts, or because of their in possession of the stickers or the flags that have the protest movement slogan on. So this is such a law that puts grave danger onto all the political activists in Hong Kong. For Hong Kong people, we've been living in a free society for decades. In mainland China, they have a huge internet firewall that there are many apps that you cannot use. like YouTube, like WhatsApp, like Facebook, and they have a serious surveillance, digital surveillance in place that they will monitor every single thing that you do and you say. If you say sensitive words, your account will be blocked and your door will be knocked by the police, and they ask you why you do so, and maybe you are imprisoned by your speech. But none of these things happened in Hong Kong because we have one country system that is supposedly to protect us from these draconian measures in mainland China and preserve our way of life, which we could talk freely, we could think freely, and we could use the internet freely. But for Hong Kong people, we are seeing the differences between these two systems narrowed down and breaching together, and this imposes huge worries for us. I think Hong Kong people, they're afraid that they are left alone by the world because the fight, the struggle that we're having, of course, Hong Kong people are important, but the support and the encouragement around the world is also crucial. So for us, we would love to really see all those encouragement and solidarity signals from the people in the other countries and also international organizations. So I hope that whenever there are news about Hong Kong, whenever there are news about how to hold China accountable, that you could contribute and to show that we are standing together. In the battle of fighting for democracy for Hong Kong, it's also crucial that how the world could contain the authoritarian expansion of China and weaken its authoritarianism. So of course, the Western democracies like the US and UK and Europe, they play important role to really containing that authoritarian expansion and to ask China to fix its human rights violation internally. Otherwise, there will be more proactive measures by these countries. And I think this is the right direction to go. Hong Kong is the forefront of the clash of authoritarianism and democratic values. We've been talking about the resection of democracy for decades. And I think that the true reason is we fed the authoritarianism. We've been using engagement and appeasement strategies to engage with China and with the hope that it will open up and democratize in the future. But the reality is it has been going to the opposite way. It gets more and more authoritarian and use its expansionist nature, use its sharp and soft power to penetrate the protection of the democracies and to infiltrate into these countries to discredit and dismantle democracies. So for me, the things that we should do is to abandon that wishful thinking and to really take actions to counter and to contain the authoritarianism in these countries and to help those people on the ground who have been fighting for democracy, for their own rights, and for the sake of democratic values. Freedom for me is about having eternal vigilance towards the injustice in the society and to be able to combat it freely. For me, it is not only about what we can do, but our responsibility to the society and how we could help the other underprivileged in it. So for me, it's important that we have the freedom to combat those injustice in the society and to bring up a better world to the humanity.